We all know the power of assessment. Assessment helps us drive instruction forward. Assessment is not just a way to slap a label on a kid after the process of learning has been completed. Assessment helps us determine our next steps. All assessment, all assessment should drive what is to come. Assessment helps us identify what might have been lost. It might help us identify the deficits. It might help us identify what hasn't yet been learned. But it can also help us as educators figure out where to go next. We have to change our mindset from one of deficit to one of strength. Our goal as an educator needs to be to build upon what is already known. When we think of assessment, another way to frame this in our heads is that assessment is simply the collection of evidence of learning, what has already been learned so that we can build upon that for the future. Far too often we look at assessment as though it's a mechanism for us to just identify the deficits as opposed to building upon what's already there. If we were to really break this down and simplify things, learning is simply the art of changing our minds. I mean, think about that for a second. Literally, learning is simply changing what's happening in our minds. And it's the same thing with kids. When we're trying to instruct students and teach students and help students learn, we are changing their minds. And if we were to really dive into what change is all about and how change really lasts, we could see the research and identify two levels of change. There's first order change and second order change. And the research is clear. Second order change, that change that requires us to truly transform everything, to sweep out the old and bring in the new, is extremely difficult. It's extremely challenging, and quite honestly, it doesn't last. First order change, however, is when we take something that's already there and we simply build upon it, where we chisel away the edges, refine it. The research tells us that first order change is the change that sticks and endures. As educators, if we're truly trying to tackle learning loss, we also have to look at what learning has been gained. Because if we want to overcome deficits, all we have to do is build upon what we already know. So let's use our assessments to focus in on strengths, figure out where kids are, so that we can build upon that, as opposed to thinking we have to start from scratch.